please go to questions. On the left, on the front row there. I'm from Apple Daily, Mrs. Lam. Good morning. About, Mr. Leung Chi-chiu, an expert on respiratory diseases, has criticized the criteria you've adopted in setting these designated control areas. He thinks the criteria are not clear and you're not able to, cut the transmission chain. In Taikushing, Lokyong, and so in Chinwan, you have not adopted this control areas measure, but then in some buildings, there's been no infection cases in past few weeks, and then you decided to blockade this building. So some question whether the biggest party to benefit from all these measures are the testing companies. Now, President Xi Jinping said that he's worried about the fourth wave of the outbreak. So does it mean that the government he's not happy with the government's effort in controlling the epidemic? And then for Sinopharm's inactivated virus vaccine. Now, in Macau, they said that they will get the vaccine this week and they could start vaccination before or after Chinese New Year. You've indicated you would like to procure this vaccine, but then experts in Hong Kong said that they must see the clinical report first before these vaccines could be sent to Hong Kong. So how are you going to deal with this conflict? Would you go, bypass the experts panel in making the arrangement? Thank you. First, about these notices or declarations of the various the designated zones. Now we have already announced the criteria for doing that. I will repeat them today. There are 3 criteria to go by. First, public health consideration. And confirmed cases is only one of the factors. Now, in epidemiological considerations or with any tracking of cases, if there are factors that could cause concern to the healthcare experts, then we will consider that. So the number of confirmed cases is not the only deciding factor. The second factor is the building condition, or perhaps it has to do with the environmental hygiene or the condition of the building. For example, the sewage system, or for 3 new buildings, it's also about the management of these buildings, because for 3 new buildings, perhaps the transmission risks are higher. The third factor is manpower. In other words, even if we wish to do more, we have to consider our capacity at any one time. So these are the 3 factors in helping us make our decision. Yesterday at the press briefing and today in media report, it seems that people are not sure who are there to make the decision. Well, I can make that clear. In CAP 599, on making such notices or the declarations, is the Secretary for Food and Health that has the power to do so. She will have regard to the 3 factors, and based on information she receives every day, she will decide on which places she might impose this declaration. So please bear that in mind. Now, and in conducting such operations, there are 3 requirements. First, these operations must be kept confidential. You can see that in recent operations, we've been able to do that, although people may have guessed, but at the end, most residents were not aware of such operation beforehand, so we're able to achieve confidentiality. The second requirement is such operation must be targeted. Now, Jordan is a large area. You may say Hong Kong is a small city, but for Jordan, there are over 150 buildings. It's still a large area. And with our internal assessment, we believe there are about 1,000 residents involved for each case, and otherwise we couldn't cope. And the third requirement is that we try to keep the the operation short, hopefully within 12 hours. That is from 7 p.m. Till 7 a.m. So we want to complete the tests in time and get results in time, so residents could then leave with wristband on them. on the effectiveness of such operations. Now, I've tried to play the role of experts, and I've said this a few times. Now, from the point of view of public health, it's not that treating the disease means success, but rather it's about preventing the disease. So it's mostly preventive effort. It's hoped that we could take actions before that's transmission. So you can't really measure the effectiveness of such operations by the number of cases identified. If we couldn't identify cases, well, it could be due to is not the key point, but relatively, we could then confirm the factors such as environmental hygiene or the building condition are safe. Now, we have conducted a there's mention of the universal compulsory testing scheme, but we need to have a lockdown for a certain period. Otherwise, with the movement of people, there could still be risk. But now the facts tell us that we are now taking this targeted testing approach because it's not possible to carry out testing on an extensive area. And you can see that these operations have been effective. Of course, every time in deciding, now at an earlier stage, many people have asked for universal testing, but we believe that program has limited effect, and we need large amount of manpower and also other public resources. Now, you asked whether these operations would benefit the testing companies. Really, you can't say that. Now, for all the private testing laboratories that partner with us in these operations, they are just taking part in the operations because they want to serve the public. Now, the unit test cost of fee of $200 is not enough to cover costs. It's easy for you to do the calculation. Now, $240, say, times 300 mandatory tests, you can count how much is involved. But then you go and you see they set up so many I think I'm testing via a video conference. And it's the usual rule of the central government that such reporting of work would not be made public before it's carried out. So, but after the occasion, the Xinhua news agency and our government have issued press release. Now, the president is very much concerned about the epidemic in Hong Kong. We're still in the fourth wave of the outbreak. And the presidency has expressed concern and worries that's totally reasonable. If the president says that, it seems that the situation is serious in Hong Kong, but I'm not worried at all, it wouldn't make sense. So I believe the president is very much concerned, and he wants to support us. He, of course, wants us to double effort, and then the central government hopes that they will give us support, and hopefully then we could control the fourth wave of the outbreak. Your third question on vaccines, that we have used advanced purchase agreements to procure the Sinovac vaccine. That's an inactivated virus vaccine. And that's another vaccine that we've explored, but we were not able to procure it. That's the Sinopharm vaccine. So what we would like to do is to obtain the data for this inactivated virus vaccines, and then the experts could recommend these vaccines to the Secretary for Food and Health for use in Hong Kong. So I've asked for support from the central government on such issues. I didn't mention any particular vaccine. Rather, for vaccines developed and produced on the mainland, it's hoped that these could be made available for use in Hong Kong for emergency use. The central government is fully aware of the legislative framework for emergency use of vaccines. In other words, there have to be sufficient data for evaluation by experts. And then the Secretary for Food and Health would authorize the emergency use. So there is no conflict there. Thank you.
Next question, please. The gentleman on the back row, please.
0 cases have been found in the 6 recent quick lockdowns the government imposed in the past few days. So how would you evaluate the effectiveness of such measures, given that there has been no cases found? And also, how would you respond to expert suggestions that an ambush-style lockdown may not be really able to contain the spread of the virus because there are still many people who may be still in the incubation period? And also, what would you say to the residents who have been affected by the measures, and what would you do to help them, especially for these people who may have suffer from financial losses during the lockdown? And also, will the government consider replacing the mainland vaccine Sinovac with other vaccines, given that the company still has not provided sufficient clinical data about the vaccine? And how confident are you that the Hong Kong will still be able to get its first batch of vaccines by the end of this month, and also roll out the vaccination program as scheduled? And also, there's a media report saying that you had a one-on-one meeting with the Chief Justice last week, just days ahead of Jimmy Lai's bail hearing yesterday. Could you confirm whether you had such a meeting with the Chief Justice? And if so, did you talk to him about the case? And also, how would you respond to concerns that it may not be appropriate for you to meet the Chief Justice privately? Thank you.
There are altogether 5 questions. I'll try to answer, but you will be sort of preventing other colleagues from asking, because my time is running out. I try to answer them more succinctly. First of all, as I have said many times, in terms of public health, a lot of the work done is preventive. In fact, to have 0 transmission, 0 infection is the best ever public health achievement that could be made by every authority. So the purpose of doing compulsory tests and doing this restriction testing declaration, of course, is with that objective in mind, that we want to achieve 0 case for the whole community. It's not just one building or one district. So we will continue to do this type of compulsory testing in order to identify any remaining silent transmission cases in community. But to have achieved 0 case, that is all residents being tested within that period were negative, is also a good sign that while you look at it, you may be worried from the public health or the building hygiene point of view about a particular area. But having gone through this test, at least the residents are much more assured that they are not living in a highly infectious area. So this is something that we'll continue to do. But as I have explained, we are choosing these areas or buildings for this sort of testing, restriction testing declaration based on a series of factors. It is not an ad hoc or arbitrary decision as such. But the number of confirmed cases in that building or district is only one of the factors. Now, this is, of course, not the only instrument or measure that the Hong Kong SAR government is adopting in order to contain the latest wave. We have been doing a lot of things, and I would refer you to read my latest monthly report on the government's efforts in fighting COVID-19, because that was a 12-month report, so I used that occasion to do a little bit of summary of the things that we are doing. It's an 8-pronged approach, covering preventing the spread from imported cases to beefing up our capacity in testing, quarantine, isolation, and so on. And we need the public support. And I hope that the media will help us to encourage residents to participate in compulsory testing and to cooperate with the government. Although we have not yet found any positive case in some of the latest RTD, that is a restriction testing declaration, we were at the same time worried that many of the units apparently have not responded to our door knocking. So whether there were individuals in that particular unit who refused to come out to do this compulsory testing is one of the things that will affect the effectiveness of the operation. Now, we try to minimize as far as possible the impact on the residents. So having done the first operation, which lasted for over 2 days, I have given this a mandate that they should aim to minimize the disruption or inconvenience to affected residents to 12 hours. So the recent operations that you have seen started from 7 p.m. when people went back to the home after work, and it should be finished by 7 a.m. as far as the so-called lockdown is concerned. So within that 12-hour period, the residents should have done their compulsory test, received the SMS indicating that they're negative and they're wearing a wristband, and they could leave by 7 a.m. back to work, go to school, and so on. So I hope residents will appreciate that we are already considerably reducing the impact on them. But as I said, this is a matter of joint efforts. It's not just the government, but the community at large has to join hands in order to contain the spread of the virus. Now, about vaccines, we have been very transparent with the community about the progress made in the procurement and the authorization of vaccines. 3 different types of vaccines have been purchased under the advanced purchase agreement, and one of them, the Fosun BioNTech, has been authorized. So the latest is this authorized vaccine will come by the end of this month. Of course, we will very much make sure that it will come. But as you have read the news in the EU, there have been all sorts of things happening in the EU, and this vaccine is manufactured in Germany. So we have to watch the situation very carefully. But since we have a contract to buy, and I hope that all the other organizations will respect this contractual relationship and allow the BioNTech vaccine to come to Hong Kong by the end of this month. And the vaccination program will be able to start almost immediately, because we have got almost everything ready in terms of the number of community vaccination centers and staffing and so on. So the arrival of the vaccines and the rollout of the vaccination program we will try to condense the lead time in between. Now, about the other 2 vaccines, let's put aside AstraZeneca, because that vaccine has never promised to come early. That's the latter half of this year. And we could not blame them, because there's huge demand for AstraZeneca in Europe. The third is, of course, this vaccine manufactured in the mainland, the Sinovac. And we have been liaising very closely with the manufacturer. The latest is we will be given the data so that the experts could consider the data and recommend for the Secretary for Food and Health to authorize this vaccine for use. And I have also appealed to the Central People's Government if there's anything that the government could help us in ensuring the early arrival of Sinovac. The response given back to me is they will help. The Central People's Government will help. But for the time being, this is a sort of contractual purchase agreement between the Hong Kong SARG and Sinovac manufacturer. The final point is I have to categorically make this statement. As the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR, I am obliged to uphold the independence of the judiciary. That was a duty imposed on me as the Chief Executive under the Basic Law, because I am not just the head of the Hong Kong SAR government. I'm the one in charge of the entire Hong Kong SAR. And the independence of the judiciary, the efficiency of the judiciary, and the smooth operation of the judiciary are matters of concern to the Chief Executive. Okay? So I need to meet with this Chief Justice, who is the head of the judiciary, to discuss those matters within our respective jurisdiction. I think the judiciary has also issued a response along that lines that the CJ, whether the current CJ or the former CJ, they did meet with me from time to time when they have issues to raise. For example, about staffing, about resources, about new court buildings, about the appointment of judges, because I'm the authority to appoint judges. And in some of the local legislation, there's a requirement for the Chief Justice to nominate and for the CE to consult. So if we don't meet, how do we do that? So this is only normal, and I would advise against any reading into that sort of legitimate and proper meetings between the CE and the CJ as intervention into judicial independence. That was totally unacceptable and would not be done by any chief executive. And as a result, none of my meetings with the former CJ or the current CJ touched upon cases. This is not the subject of our conversation at all. 多謝大家。
Thank you.